Have you ever felt like you're trapped inside your own mind, knowing what you want to say in a new language, but unable to get the words out? That frustrating gap between understanding a language and speaking it naturally is something millions of language learners experience every day. Today's story will take you on a journey that might feel all too familiar. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to LMJ English. I'm thrilled to have you join us for another exciting journey through storytelling. Today, we'll explore the powerful story of Olivia, an Italian student who arrives in New York with years of English textbook knowledge, but discovers that real-life conversations are something entirely different. Before we dive into this captivating tale about breaking through language barriers and finding your authentic voice, please take a moment to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss our latest stories designed to help you improve your English naturally. Whether you're just beginning your English journey or looking to achieve that natural, effortless fluency that seems so elusive, Olivia's story will show you that the path to speaking naturally isn't about perfect grammar or memorizing more vocabulary lists. It's about something much more fundamental. Let's find out what that is together. The overwhelming first days in a new world. When Olivia first stepped off the plane at JFK Airport, the English language she had studied for years in Italy suddenly felt like a foreign concept. Standing in the middle of Times Square, surrounded by flashing lights and hundreds of voices speaking all at once, she clutched her suitcase tightly, feeling small among the towering buildings. The city was exactly as she had seen in movies, big, loud, and full of people who always seemed to be in a hurry. But experiencing it in person was entirely different. Back home, Olivia had been a top student in her English classes. She could recite grammar rules perfectly, write well-structured essays, and had memorized enough vocabulary to pass every test with flying colors. Her teachers had praised her diligence, and she had been confident that her English skills would serve her well in America. But now, faced with the rapid-fire speech of New Yorkers, she felt like all those years of study had been for nothing. The first blow to her confidence came during a simple interaction at a grocery store near her small apartment. Olivia had carefully selected a few basic items, bread, eggs, milk, and approached the cashier with apprehension. When the cashier spoke to her, the words seemed to blur together. "Do you need a bag?" the woman repeated, slower this time, noticing Olivia's confusion. Even though Olivia understood the question, her throat tightened and no words came out. She simply nodded, feeling her face turn hot with embarrassment as she took her groceries and hurried out. Each day brought similar challenges. Taking the subway became an exercise in anxiety as announcements echoed through the stations too quickly for her to comprehend. When a stranger asked if the train went to Brooklyn, Olivia froze, understanding his words but unable to formulate a response. She watched other passengers navigate the complex transit system with ease, while she relied on observing and imitating their actions. Her apartment offered little comfort as a refuge from these daily struggles. She shared it with another international student named Mia from Brazil, who faced similar language barriers. They communicated in broken English, helping each other when they could, but mostly staying quiet, both afraid of making mistakes. Their apartment became a silent sanctuary where they could escape the intimidating English-speaking world outside. The gap between textbook English and real-world communication became increasingly apparent. In school, Olivia had learned phrases like "how do you do?" and "I am fine, thank you," but no one in New York spoke that way. Instead, people said things like "what's up?" or "how's it going?" leaving her confused and unsure how to respond appropriately. The contractions, slang, idioms, and cultural references that peppered everyday conversations made even simple interactions challenging. At night, Olivia would lie awake replaying the day's failed attempts at communication. She wondered if she would ever truly belong in this city, if she would ever be able to express herself without feeling like an outsider. Her dream of living in New York was turning into a lonely reality far different from what she had imagined. She had not anticipated that language would build such a wall between her and the vibrant city life she had come to experience. Yet beneath her frustration and embarrassment, a determination began to grow. Olivia wasn't ready to give up. There had to be a way to bridge this gap between her textbook knowledge and the natural English she heard all around her. She just needed to find it. When traditional learning falls short. After 2 weeks in New York, Olivia sat at her small desk piled high with English textbooks, workbooks, and vocabulary lists. She flipped through pages of carefully organized grammar rules and formal dialogue examples, looking for answers that weren't there. The stark reality was becoming clearer each day. The English she had studied for years was fundamentally different from the language spoken on the streets of New York. In her home country, Olivia's English education had focused almost exclusively on grammar precision and vocabulary memorization. Teachers rewarded students who could correctly identify the past perfect tense or who scored highest on vocabulary quizzes. Reading and writing were prioritized, while speaking was limited to rehearsed dialogues and carefully constructed sentences. There was little room for the messy, spontaneous nature of real conversation. The problem wasn't just about knowing the right words. It was about the speed and rhythm of natural speech, the unexpected responses, the cultural context that gave meaning to phrases, and the confidence to engage without fear of judgment. All of these elements were absent from her traditional language education. One evening, Olivia attempted to watch an American television show without subtitles. She recognized individual words, but couldn't follow the rapid dialogue or understand the humor. The characters spoke with regional accents, used idioms she'd never encountered, and referenced cultural touchpoints that meant nothing to her. After 15 frustrating minutes, she turned it off, feeling defeated once again. The emotional barriers were perhaps the most difficult to overcome. Each unsuccessful interaction reinforced her fear of speaking. She had developed an intense perfectionism. If she couldn't say something flawlessly, she preferred not to speak at all. This led to a paralyzing self-consciousness that made even the simplest exchanges stressful. Olivia began to avoid situations where she would need to speak English, creating a cycle that only worsened her isolation. Her initial coping mechanisms were proving ineffective. She tried memorizing phrases from guidebooks for tourists, but they sounded stilted and unnatural when she used them. She attempted to prepare scripted responses for common questions, but conversations rarely followed her anticipated patterns. She even considered taking more formal English classes, but worried they would simply replicate the same teaching methods that had left her unprepared for real-world communication. Her roommate Mia suggested they practice English together, but their conversations felt artificial and strained. Both were making the same mistakes, and neither could guide the other toward more natural speech patterns. They were stuck in the same cycle of hesitation and frustration. The gap between Olivia's academic knowledge and practical communication skills was becoming a canyon. She excelled at identifying grammar errors on paper, but stumbled over basic questions in conversation. She could write eloquent paragraphs, but couldn't order a coffee without anxiety. Something fundamental was missing from her approach to learning English, something that textbooks and traditional classrooms hadn't provided. As she closed her grammar book with a sigh, Olivia realized that continuing to study in the same way would only lead to more frustration. If she wanted different results, she needed a different method entirely. She needed to step away from the safety of textbook exercises and find a way to connect with the living, breathing language that surrounded her in New York. The question was, how? The turning point, learning to listen. The morning after her realization, Olivia stood outside a small cafe near her apartment, her heart pounding in her chest. She had spent the previous night thinking about her approach to learning English and remembered something her teacher back home had once said, "If you want to speak a language, you must listen to it first." This simple insight had sparked an idea. Babies don't learn to speak by studying grammar rules. They absorb language by listening intently to those around them. They hear words and phrases repeated in context until patterns emerge and meaning becomes clear. Only then do they begin to speak. Perhaps, Olivia thought, she needed to approach English more like a child learning their first language, through immersion, observation, and gradual participation. With this new perspective, she took a deep breath and pushed open the cafe door. The smell of fresh coffee filled the air as she approached the counter. The barista smiled warmly and said, "Good morning. What can I get for you?" Olivia had practiced this moment in her head. She took another breath and replied, "Can I have a tea, please?" The barista nodded. "Sure, what kind of tea?" This unexpected follow-up question caught Olivia off guard. Her mind went blank as she scanned the menu board, the names of different teas blurring together. Rather than attempting to pronounce an unfamiliar name, she simply pointed to one on the list. "Oh, green tea. Great choice," the barista said cheerfully. Olivia paid, took her tea, and found a quiet table in the corner. The interaction hadn't been perfect. She'd resorted to pointing rather than speaking, but she had successfully ordered without switching to Italian or giving up entirely. It was a small victory, but significant. As she sipped her tea, instead of dwelling on her imperfect performance, Olivia made a decision. Today she would try something different. Instead of focusing on speaking, she would focus on listening. She would pay attention to how real people spoke in everyday situations, their phrases, intonation, and rhythm. She opened a new notebook, ready to document what she would hear. For the next few hours, Olivia sat quietly in the cafe, observing conversations around her. At a nearby table, two friends were chatting about their weekend plans. One said, "I'm so exhausted from work this week." Olivia noticed that she didn't say, "I am very tired as textbooks might teach," but "I'm so exhausted." She wrote this down. So exhausted instead of very tired. Later, a man ended a phone call with, "I'll catch you later." Puzzled, Olivia realized he wasn't talking about physically catching someone. It was an informal way to say goodbye. She added this to her notebook. "Catch you later equals see you later." As the day progressed, Olivia moved from the cafe to a park, then to a bookstore, listening intently to conversations around her. Her notebook filled with natural phrases and expressions that she'd never encountered in textbooks. "What's up?" instead of "How are you?" "No worries," instead of "You're welcome." "I'm good," instead of "I am fine, thank you." "Grab a bite," instead of "Have a meal." These phrases weren't just different words. They reflected a more relaxed, authentic way of speaking that characterized real American English. By the end of the day, Olivia had filled several pages with observations. For the first time since arriving in New York, she felt a sense of progress. She hadn't mastered speaking yet, but she was beginning to understand the language as it was actually used. That night, lying in bed, Olivia reflected on her day. The traditional methods had taught her what was technically correct, but not what was natural or common. By shifting her focus from perfect speech to attentive listening, she had discovered a new path forward. The next step would be to begin incorporating these authentic phrases into her own speech, but without the paralyzing fear of making mistakes. As she drifted off to sleep, Olivia felt a renewed sense of hope. Perhaps the key to speaking English naturally wasn't in her textbooks at all. It was all around her in the vibrant, messy, beautiful conversations of New York City. She just needed to listen, building a new learning strategy. Armed with her notebook of authentic English phrases, Olivia began the next phase of her language journey. Instead of retreating to her apartment to study grammar rules, she created a deliberate strategy to immerse herself in real-world English. Each morning, she would select one or two phrases from her notebook and commit to using them in conversation that day. Her first target was replacing the formal, "How are you?" with the more natural, "How's it going?" She practiced saying it quietly to herself as she walked to the grocery store, feeling the rhythm of the contraction, "how's," instead of the more formal, "how is." At the checkout counter, when the cashier greeted her, Olivia took a deep breath and said, "Hey, how's it going?" The words felt strange in her mouth, but the cashier responded with a casual, "Good, thanks. You," without any indication that Olivia's speech sounded unusual. She smiled and replied, "I'm good, thanks," another phrase she'd noted real New Yorkers used instead of "I am fine, thank you." This small exchange was transformative. Olivia had successfully navigated a brief but completely natural conversation using authentic language patterns. The interaction hadn't required complex grammar or extensive vocabulary, just the right phrases delivered with enough confidence to maintain the flow of conversation. Encouraged by this success, Olivia expanded her strategy. Every day, she would spend at least 2 hours in public places, cafes, parks, libraries, with her notebook documenting how people spoke in different contexts. She noticed that friends used different language than colleagues, that service interactions followed certain patterns, and that New Yorkers had particular phrases that seemed unique to the city. She observed not just the words people used, but also their body language, tone, and the unspoken rules of conversation. Americans stood at a different distance when talking than Italians did. They made more direct eye contact. They used their hands differently when speaking. These nonverbal aspects of communication were just as important as the words themselves. As her collection of authentic phrases grew, Olivia began categorizing them by situation, ordering food, asking for directions, making small talk, expressing opinions. This organization helped her prepare for specific interactions rather than trying to master the entire language at once. She created situation-specific practice scenarios and rehearsed them before attempting them in real life. One crucial insight emerged from her observations. Mistakes were a normal part of conversation, even for native speakers. She watched as Americans fumbled words, restarted sentences, and used fillers like, and like without any apparent embarrassment. No one expected perfect speech all the time. This realization was liberating. Perhaps she didn't need to achieve perfection before participating in conversations. Olivia developed a technique she called listen, attempt, adjust. She would listen carefully to how native speakers handled a particular situation, attempt to use similar language herself, and then adjust her approach based on the response she received. If someone seemed confused by what she said, she would note the misunderstanding and try a different phrase next time. If a conversation flowed naturally, she would reinforce that successful pattern in future interactions. This experimental approach replaced her previous fear of mistakes with curiosity. Each interaction became a learning opportunity rather than a test of her worth. When she successfully used the phrase, "Could I get the check, please?" at a restaurant instead of the more textbook, "May I have the bill?" she felt a small thrill of accomplishment. When she mistakenly said, "Open the light," instead of "turn on the light," to her roommate, she simply noted the correction and moved on without the crushing embarrassment she would have felt before. Gradually, Olivia's notebook became less about documenting others' speech and more about recording her own progress. She tracked successful conversations, noted phrases that felt comfortable, and identified areas where she still struggled. The notebook became a tangible record of her growth, showing how far she had come from the frightened student who could barely order tea. 3 weeks into her new approach, Olivia realized something significant. She was no longer just studying English. She was using it as a tool for connection. The language was becoming less of a barrier and more of a bridge to the city and people around her. Her focus had shifted from perfect academic English to functional, natural communication, and the difference was beginning to show. Finding my people, the power of community. After nearly a month of her new learning strategy, Olivia had made progress with brief interactions in stores and cafes, but she still lacked something crucial: meaningful conversations. Her exchanges were functional but superficial. She could order food, ask for directions, and handle basic transactions, but she yearned to express her thoughts, share stories, and connect with others on a deeper level. One evening, as Olivia scrolled through her phone looking for local events, her roommate Mia peeked over her shoulder. "Hey, Olivia, there's an international student event at the library tomorrow. Want to go?" Olivia's first instinct was to decline. A room full of people meant countless opportunities for linguistic missteps and embarrassment. But then she remembered her commitment to growth over perfection. If she wanted to progress beyond transactional English, she needed to push herself into more challenging social situations. "Yes, let's go," she replied, ignoring the flutter of anxiety in her stomach. The next evening, Olivia and Mia arrived at the library where the event was being held. The meeting room was filled with students from around the world, all speaking English with various accents and levels of proficiency. Some chatted confidently in small groups, while others, like Olivia, hovered near the walls, looking uncertain. A woman with a warm smile approached them. "Hey, welcome. I'm Sarah. What are your names?" Mia answered quickly, but Olivia hesitated, suddenly forgetting how to introduce herself despite having done it countless times before. She took a deep breath, remembering her strategy. Attempt, even if imperfect. "I'm Olivia," she managed to say. "I'm from Italy." "That's awesome. Italy is beautiful," Sarah replied. "Come on, let me introduce you to some people." Sarah led them to a table where 3 other students were engaged in conversation. "Guys, this is Olivia and Mia," she announced. A tall young man with glasses smiled at Olivia. "Hey, Olivia, I'm Jake. First time at one of these events." She nodded. "Yes, first time." Jake grinned. "Cool. Don't worry, we all felt nervous at first." His casual acknowledgement of her anxiety was unexpectedly comforting. As the evening progressed, Olivia found herself listening more than speaking, but she was no longer doing so out of fear. She was observing how this diverse group of English learners communicated with each other. They made grammar mistakes, searched for words, and occasionally reverted to gestures when vocabulary failed them. But the conversation continued to flow. No one corrected every error or showed impatience when someone struggled to express an idea. Instead, they focused on understanding each other, offering words when someone seemed stuck, and building on shared interests regardless of language barriers. At one point, Jake turned to Olivia and asked, "So, what do you like to do for fun?" Olivia hesitated, mentally debating whether to say, "I like reading books," or "I like to read books," which structure was grammatically correct. Then she remembered her revelation. It didn't matter. What mattered was connection. "I like reading books," she said simply. Jake nodded. "Nice. What kind of books?" "I like mystery books," she replied, feeling a flutter of excitement at discussing something she loved. The conversation continued, touching on favorite authors and recent reads. Olivia made mistakes, She mixed up tenses and occasionally used Italian word order, but nobody seemed to care. The focus wasn't on her grammar, but on her ideas, her personality, her unique perspective. As the evening ended, Jake and several others exchanged phone numbers with Olivia and invited her to join their study group. "We meet at the library twice a week," Jake explained. "We help each other with assignments and practice English. You should come." On the walk home, Mia nudged Olivia's shoulder. "You were talking a lot. I've never seen you speak so much English before." Olivia realized Mia was right. Something had shifted that evening. In the company of other language learners who understood her struggles, she had found freedom to speak without the crushing weight of perfectionism. These weren't native speakers with flawless English, but fellow travelers on the same journey, each at different points along the path. The next week, Olivia joined the study group, and soon it became a highlight of her routine. The group members came from Brazil, Korea, Saudi Arabia, France, and Japan, creating a miniature United Nations at their library table. They corrected each other gently, taught each other slang from their countries, and celebrated each other's progress. When Jake mentioned a weekend game night at his apartment, Olivia agreed to attend without hesitation. The evening was filled with laughter as they played Taboo, a game that required describing words without using certain forbidden terms. When it was Olivia's turn to describe ocean, she blurted out, "It is big blue water, fish live here." Everyone laughed as someone correctly guessed ocean, and Olivia laughed with them, no longer mortified by her imperfect speech. Through these new friendships, Olivia discovered something crucial. Language learning flourished in a supportive community. Her friends became both her practice partners and her safety net, encouraging her to stretch beyond her comfort zone while catching her when she stumbled. They validated her progress, celebrated her successes, and normalized her struggles as part of the shared experience of learning a new language. In this community, English transformed from an academic subject to be mastered into a living tool for building relationships. The language became meaningful because the connections it enabled were meaningful. Each conversation, each shared joke, each moment of mutual understanding reinforced Olivia's growing confidence and competence. By opening herself to these relationships, Olivia had discovered perhaps the most powerful catalyst for natural language acquisition: genuine human connection. The moment English became mine. 6 months after arriving in New York, Olivia experienced a moment that would mark a fundamental shift in her relationship with English. She was walking to class on a crisp autumn morning when someone tapped her shoulder. Turning around, she saw a young woman with a map and a hesitant expression. "Hi, do you know where the library is?" the woman asked slowly in the careful cadence of someone still learning the language. Without thinking, Olivia responded, "Yes, it's just down that street. Turn right at the corner and you'll see it." Only after the woman smiled, thanked her, and walked away did Olivia realize what had just happened. She had given directions in English, not with careful preparation or mental translation, but spontaneously and naturally. The words had flowed without conscious effort, as if English had suddenly become an extension of her thoughts rather than a foreign code to decipher. That evening, Olivia sat by her window overlooking the city lights, contemplating this small but significant moment. She had gone from being the confused newcomer who couldn't ask for directions to being the confident local who provided them. When had this transformation occurred? There had been no dramatic breakthrough, no single moment when everything clicked into place, just a gradual accumulation of small victories, daily practices, and consistent exposure. The next morning, Olivia noticed something even more surprising. As her alarm clock jolted her awake, her first drowsy thought, "I need 5 more minutes," had formed in English, not Italian. She sat up, startled by this realization. Typically, her internal monologue began in Italian, which she would then mentally translate when she needed to speak English. But now, English words had emerged without translation, as if bypassing the usual circuit in her brain. Curious about this change, Olivia began testing herself throughout the day. While making coffee, she deliberately tried thinking directly in English. Today I have class at 10. After that, I'll meet Mia for lunch. The thoughts came more naturally than she expected, without the usual mental gymnastics of translation. This internal shift soon manifested in external changes. When Olivia dropped a book in the university library, a nearby student picked it up for her. "Thank you," Olivia said automatically, without the split-second delay that had always betrayed her mental translation process. The exchange was so ordinary that the other student probably didn't give it a second thought. But for Olivia, it represented a milestone. More evidence of this transformation continued to emerge. One evening, while watching a sitcom with Mia, Olivia laughed at a joke at the same moment as the audience, before she could possibly have translated the punchline into Italian. "You got that joke," Mia observed with a smile. "Yeah, it was funny," Olivia replied, realizing that she had understood the humor directly, not through the filter of translation. Even her dreams began to change. One night, Olivia dreamed she was walking through Central Park, stopped to ask someone for the time, and realized upon waking that the entire exchange had taken place in English. Her brain was no longer reserving English for conscious, waking efforts. It had integrated the language deeply enough that it emerged even in her dreams. Perhaps the most telling sign came during a video call with her mother in Italy. As Olivia excitedly shared stories about her classes and friends, she found herself struggling to find the right Italian words. She laughed as she mixed in English phrases, and her mother teased her. "Olivia, you're becoming a real New Yorker." The comment was lighthearted, but it contained a profound truth. Olivia wasn't just learning English anymore. She was living it. The language had become so interwoven with her daily experiences that it felt like a natural part of her identity rather than an acquired skill. This didn't mean her English was perfect. She still made grammar mistakes, occasionally searched for words, and sometimes misunderstood cultural references. But the fundamental relationship had changed. English was no longer something external that she struggled to master. It had become a fluid, integrated part of how she experienced and engaged with the world. On a deeper level, Olivia realized that she had crossed an invisible threshold in language acquisition. She had moved from consciously constructing language to intuitively using it, from translating meaning to directly expressing it. The countless hours of listening, practicing, making mistakes, and engaging in real conversations had rewired her brain in subtle but powerful ways. That evening, Olivia added a new entry to her language journal. Not a phrase to practice or a grammar rule to remember, but a simple observation. "Today, English feels like my language too." It wasn't a declaration of mastery, but of belonging. The language that had once been a barrier had become a bridge, not just to New York and its people, but to a new version of herself. Living in my new voice. 8 months in her New York journey, Olivia walked into her favorite cafe, the same one where months ago she had been too nervous to order anything more complicated than "tea, please." Now, she approached the counter with easy confidence. "Hey, good morning. Can I get a medium latte with oat milk?" she said to the barista, who nodded and replied, "Of course, that'll be $5.50. Olivia handed over the money, took her coffee, and found a seat by the window. As she sipped her drink and watched the morning commuters hurry past, she realized something remarkable. She hadn't planned her sentence before speaking. There had been no mental rehearsal, no translation from Italian, no anxious review of grammar. She had simply spoken as naturally as breathing. This new reality extended far beyond coffee shops. In her English literature class, Olivia had begun participating in discussions without the paralyzing fear that had once kept her silent. When her professor asked about symbolism in a novel they were studying, Olivia raised her hand without hesitation. "Yes, Olivia," the professor said, perhaps surprised to hear from a usually quiet student. "I think the river in the story represents the main character's journey," Olivia explained. "It starts chaotic and dangerous, but becomes calmer as she finds her path, just like her emotional state throughout the book." Her classmates nodded in agreement, and the professor smiled. "That's an excellent observation." Walking out of class that day, Olivia felt a profound sense of inclusion. She wasn't just physically present in the classroom. She was intellectually and emotionally engaged, able to share her thoughts and contribute to the collective understanding. English was no longer keeping her on the sidelines of her own education. Even more meaningful were the friendships that had blossomed once language barriers diminished. What had begun as a study group at the library had evolved into genuine connections. Jake, Sophia, Minji, and the others weren't just language practice partners anymore. They were friends who shared meals, celebrated birthdays, and supported each other through homesickness and academic stress. One evening, as they gathered for dinner at a small restaurant, Jake proposed a toast. "To Olivia," he said, raising his glass, "who spoke maybe 10 words when we first met and now won't shut up." Everyone laughed, including Olivia. The teasing was affectionate, a recognition of how far she had come. After dinner, walking home with Sophia, the conversation turned serious. "How did you do it, Olivia?" Sophia asked. "When I first met you, you could barely introduce yourself. Now you're debating politics and telling jokes. How did you change so fast?" Olivia considered the question. "I stopped trying to speak perfect English," she said finally. "I realized that communication is not about perfect grammar or knowing every word. It's about connecting with people, sharing ideas, being understood." Sophia nodded thoughtfully. "But weren't you afraid of making mistakes?" "I still get so nervous." "Of course," Olivia admitted. "I was terrified, but I learned that mistakes are part of the process. Every time I made a mistake and the world didn't end, I became a little braver." "So just talk more?" Sophia asked, sounding skeptical. Olivia smiled. "Talk more, listen more, care less about being perfect. One day, you'll realize you're thinking in English without trying." As she continued to integrate into life in New York, Olivia found herself taking on new roles that would have been unimaginable months earlier. When her university organized an orientation for new international students, she volunteered as a peer mentor. Standing before a group of nervous newcomers, she shared her own story of language struggles and eventual breakthrough. "The textbooks teach you the rules of English," she told them, "but only real conversations teach you how to live in English. Don't wait until you feel ready to speak. You'll be waiting forever. Speak now. Speak imperfectly. Speak anyway." After the orientation, a student from China approached her. "Your English is so good," he said admiringly. "I hope I can speak like you someday." Olivia smiled, remembering how she had once felt about fluent speakers. "You will," she assured him. "Just remember that fluency isn't a destination you reach all at once. It's built day by day, conversation by conversation." As her first year in New York approached its end, Olivia received news that validated her journey in an unexpected way. Her writing professor nominated an essay she had written for a university-wide contest for international students. The essay, titled "Finding My Voice," described her evolution from silent observer to confident communicator. When she received word that her essay had won second place, Olivia felt a sense of completion. The language that had once been her greatest challenge had become the medium through which she could articulate her experiences and insights, and others found value in what she had to say. The award ceremony was held in the university's main hall. As Olivia stood at the podium to read an excerpt from her essay, she looked out at the audience of students, professors, and administrators. 8 months earlier, this moment would have been her worst nightmare. Now, she felt only a flutter of excitement as she began to read. Language is more than vocabulary and grammar. It is the bridge between who we are inside and how we exist in the world. To learn a new language truly is to discover a new way of being, to find another voice that is still authentically yours. My journey to speak English naturally wasn't about perfect pronunciation or flawless grammar. It was about finding the courage to be myself in a new language. As applause filled the hall, Olivia knew she had come full circle. The frightened girl who had arrived in New York clutching her suitcase and her textbook English had transformed into a young woman who could share her thoughts, pursue her education, build meaningful relationships, and even help others, all through a language that now felt like her own. English was no longer something external that she struggled to master. It had become another dimension of her identity, another way of expressing who she was and connecting with the world around her. She had not just learned to speak English naturally. She had learned to live in English authentically. Lessons for fellow language travelers. 1 year after arriving in New York, Olivia sat in Central Park, watching the afternoon sunlight filter through the trees. Her journey from frightened newcomer to confident English speaker had taught her lessons that went beyond language acquisition. Insights about learning, communication, and personal growth that she wished she had understood from the beginning. As she observed tourists struggling with maps and directions, international students practicing careful English with each other, and the fluid multilingual conversations happening all around her, she reflected on what she would tell someone just starting their own language journey. The first and perhaps most important lesson was that perfectionism is the enemy of progress. Olivia had spent years in classrooms striving for grammatical perfection, yet those efforts had left her nearly mute when faced with real-world communication. It was only when she gave herself permission to speak imperfectly, to make mistakes, to sound unpolished, to occasionally use the wrong word, that she began to truly learn. Language is not mathematics, she would tell new learners. There is no perfect equation. Real speaking is messy, with pauses, corrections, and improvisation. Native speakers make mistakes constantly, yet they communicate effectively because they prioritize connection over correctness. The second crucial insight was that authentic immersion matters more than formal study. While textbooks and grammar guides had their place, they couldn't replace the learning that happened in coffee shops, on subways, at parties, and in casual conversations. It wasn't enough to study the language in isolation. One had to live within it, experiencing how it functioned in the real world. Olivia had made more progress in 8 months of active immersion than in 8 years of classroom study. The difference wasn't just in the quantity of exposure, but in its quality, the emotional investment, practical necessity, and immediate feedback that came with using language for genuine communication rather than academic exercises. Another vital lesson was the power of community in language acquisition. Olivia's breakthrough hadn't happened in isolation. It had been nurtured by friends who encouraged her, corrected her gently, celebrated her progress, and created a safe space for experimentation. Learning alongside others who shared her struggles had transformed the process from a lonely ordeal into a collective journey. Find your people, she would advise language learners. Not just native speakers to practice with, but fellow travelers who understand what you're going through. Sometimes the most helpful person isn't the one with perfect English, but the one who remembers what it's like to struggle with it. Perhaps most surprising was how much Olivia had learned about the nature of language itself. Before coming to New York, She had seen English as a set of rules to master, a system external to herself that needed to be conquered through diligent study. Now she understood that language was something far more organic and personal. Language wasn't just about transmitting information. It was about belonging, identity, and how we exist in the world. When Olivia had begun thinking and dreaming in English, when words had started to flow without translation, she hadn't just acquired new linguistic skills. She had integrated another way of being into her sense of self. This understanding had profound implications for how she measured progress. Early in her journey, Olivia had judged her English by objective standards, grammar tests, vocabulary size, pronunciation accuracy. Now she recognized more meaningful metrics. Could she express her authentic thoughts? Did she feel comfortable in conversations? Was she able to connect with others through the language? Success isn't speaking without an accent or never making a grammar mistake, she would tell new learners. Success is ordering coffee without anxiety. Success is making someone laugh with a joke. Success is feeling at home in your second language. Olivia had also learned that language acquisition wasn't linear. There were plateaus and breakthroughs, days of frustrating setbacks and moments of unexpected fluency. Progress sometimes came in dramatic leaps, like the day she realized she was thinking in English, but more often it accumulated slowly through countless small interactions and daily practice. Be patient with yourself, she would advise. Some days you'll feel like you're getting worse, not better. That's normal. Trust the process and keep engaging with the language, even when it feels difficult. Finally, Olivia had discovered that learning a language was as much about emotional barriers as linguistic ones. Fear, embarrassment, and the desire to maintain one's dignity often prevented learners from the very experiences that would help them improve. The willingness to be vulnerable, to speak despite uncertainty, to accept correction without shame, to laugh at one's own mistakes, was perhaps the most essential quality for successful language acquisition. As the afternoon light began to fade and Olivia gathered her things to leave the park, she smiled at how far she had come. The journey hadn't been easy, but its difficulties had made the accomplishment all the more meaningful. She had not just learned a language. She had expanded the boundaries of who she could be and how she could connect with the world. English was now a part of her, not a separate skill to be mastered, but an integrated dimension of her identity. And in that integration lay the essence of what it meant to speak naturally, not to perform a language, but to live within it. Conclusion: finding my voice. As Olivia rode the subway back to her apartment, she caught her reflection in the window against the blur of the passing underground tunnel. The face looking back at her was the same one that had arrived in New York a year ago, yet something fundamental had changed. Her eyes held a confidence that hadn't been there before, a certainty about her place in this city and her ability to navigate its challenges. Thinking back to her first terrifying subway ride, when announcements had sounded like meaningless noise and she'd been too afraid to ask for help, she marveled at the transformation. Now she moved through New York with the ease of belonging, chatting with shopkeepers, debating ideas in class, laughing with friends, and even helping lost tourists find their way, all in a language that had once been an insurmountable barrier. The journey hadn't been about perfecting her grammar or eliminating her accent. It had been about finding her voice, her authentic self, in a new language. English had become more than a tool for communication. It was now a lens through which she experienced the world, a channel for her thoughts and feelings, another room in the house of her identity where she could comfortably dwell. What had made the difference? Not more vocabulary lists or grammar drills, but the courage to step beyond the safe boundaries of textbook English into the messy, vibrant reality of living language. It was the willingness to listen before speaking, to embrace mistakes as learning opportunities, to find community among fellow language learners, and to measure progress by connection rather than perfection. Perhaps most importantly, it was the recognition that language acquisition wasn't just an academic exercise, but a deeply personal journey of growth and transformation. Learning to speak English naturally hadn't just changed how Olivia communicated, it had changed how she saw herself and her place in the world. As the subway reached her stop and Olivia joined the flow of commuters exiting the station, she smiled at a memory from her early days in New York. She had been so focused on avoiding mistakes that she had barely spoken at all, trading the possibility of connection for the certainty of correctness. How much she would have missed if she had remained trapped in that fear. That evening, Olivia opened her laptop to find an email from a professor inviting her to be a teaching assistant for a course on comparative literature, a position that would require her to lead discussion sections and help international students improve their academic English. A year ago, such an offer would have seemed impossible. Now it felt like a natural next step. As she typed her acceptance, Olivia reflected on what she would tell her students about language learning. She would share her own story, of course, the struggles, breakthroughs, and lessons learned along the way. But beyond the specific strategies and techniques, she would emphasize the deeper truth she had discovered, that speaking a new language naturally isn't about achieving some external standard of perfection. It's about allowing that language to become part of who you are. The real milestone isn't when others no longer notice your accent or when you stop making grammatical errors. It's when you stop noticing yourself speaking a foreign language, when the words flow from your thoughts to your lips without the conscious filter of translation, when you can be fully present in conversations rather than mentally rehearsing what to say next, when you can express joy, anger, humor, and love as authentically in your second language as in your first. Olivia closed her laptop and walked to the window of her apartment, looking out at the city lights. New York had transformed from an overwhelming metropolis of intimidating English speakers into a home where she had found her voice. The journey wasn't over. Language learning never truly ends, but she had crossed the threshold from struggling with English to living in it. For anyone else on the path to speaking a new language naturally, Olivia's story offers both guidance and encouragement. The key isn't found in perfect pronunciation or flawless grammar, but in genuine connection, persistent practice, and the courage to speak before you feel ready. It's about transforming language from something you study into something you inhabit. In the end, speaking naturally isn't about sounding like a native speaker. It's about sounding like yourself, your authentic, expressive, connected self in a new linguistic home. Thank you so much for joining us for Olivia's inspiring journey of language transformation. We hope her story has resonated with you and perhaps reflected some of your own experiences with language learning. If you enjoyed this story and found it helpful for your English learning journey, please take a moment to like this video and share it with friends who might be struggling with similar challenges. Your support helps us continue creating content that makes English learning more accessible and enjoyable. Don't forget to subscribe to LMJ English and hit the notification bell so you never miss our weekly stories designed to help you improve your English naturally. Our community is growing every day with passionate language learners just like you. In the comments below, we'd love to hear about your own language learning experiences. Have you had a breakthrough moment like Olivia? What strategies have helped you the most in speaking English more naturally? Your insights might be exactly what another learner needs to hear today. Remember, the path to natural English isn't about perfection. It's about connection, persistence, and embracing the journey with all its challenges and victories. Until next time, keep practicing, stay curious, and most importantly, enjoy the process of finding your authentic voice in English. Key vocabulary: Overwhelm, verb to have a strong emotional effect on someone, making it difficult for them to think clearly. Example, standing in Times Square with bright lights and hundreds of voices was overwhelming for Olivia. Clutch, verb to hold something tightly, especially because of fear or anxiety. Example, Olivia clutched her suitcase tightly, feeling small among the towering buildings. Barrier, noun something that prevents movement, progress, or access. Example, language was a barrier between Olivia and the vibrant city life she had come to experience. Struggle, verb to experience difficulty and make a very great effort in order to do something. Example, Olivia struggled to catch people's words when they spoke quickly. Breakthrough, noun a sudden, dramatic, and important discovery or development. Example, thinking in English without translating was a major breakthrough in Olivia's language journey. Immersion, noun the act of becoming completely involved in an activity or interest. Example, Olivia made more progress through active immersion than years of classroom study. Perfectionism, noun refusal to accept any standard short of perfection. Example, Olivia realized that perfectionism was preventing her from speaking English. Hesitate, verb to pause before saying or doing something, especially because of uncertainty. Example, Olivia hesitated when Jake asked her where she was from. Fluency, noun the ability to speak or write a language easily, well, and quickly. Example, Olivia understood that fluency isn't a destination you reach all at once. Milestone, noun an important event in the development or history of something or someone. Example, speaking without mental translation was a significant milestone in Olivia's language journey. Authentic, adjective genuine or real, not copied or false. Example, Olivia wanted to sound authentic rather than speaking textbook English. Integration, noun the process of combining one thing with another so that they become a whole. Example, the integration of English into Olivia's thinking was a gradual process. Anxiety, noun a feeling of worry, nervousness, or unease about something with an uncertain outcome. Example, ordering coffee without anxiety became a measure of success for Olivia. Navigate, verb to find a way through or around a complex situation or place. Example, Olivia learned to navigate conversations without fear of making mistakes. Persistence, noun firm or obstinate continuance in a course of action in spite of difficulty or opposition. Example, Olivia's persistence in practicing English daily led to her eventual success. Vulnerable, adjective exposed to the possibility of being attacked or harmed, either physically or emotionally. Example, being willing to be vulnerable was essential for Olivia's language learning. Transformation, noun a complete change in the appearance or character of something or someone. Example, Olivia underwent a transformation from fearful newcomer to confident English speaker. Setback, noun a reversal or check in progress. Example, Olivia learned that language acquisition includes days of frustrating setbacks. Embrace, verb to accept or support something willingly or enthusiastically. Example, Olivia embraced mistakes as learning opportunities rather than failures. Inhabit, verb to live in or occupy a place. Example, speaking naturally isn't about studying a language, but about inhabiting it.